Hi guys, Matt from howtogardendesign.com, back with step 3 in my 7-step garden design guide, site analysis. Now step 2 involved developing criteria for the different activities or features you'd like to do or see in your garden. Now you need to look into the space you're working with, your site. I believe good design lets the site and surrounding conditions inform the shape and use of a space. Poor design ignores local elements. It is usually a previous design taken from somewhere else and overlaid on the site. Using your local conditions effectively can really add an extra layer to your design. Let's look at a quick example. The Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne, Australia has a garden courtyard, one of 4 small courtyards built about 15 years ago. The material palette is nice and simple: trees, plants, timber and stone. You can see a darker paving on the left of the courtyard and a lighter paving running through the middle. In between these runs a thin strip of marble. This line matches the shadow cast by the wall on a specific date, Remembrance Day, the 11th of November, every year. A simple gesture, it does however show a simple way site analysis, in this case the shadows cast due to sunlight, can influence the design. For many small projects, site analysis is often overlooked, or if it is considered, it is only to cover the basics. Most experts, designers and builders, live and work in the area they are designing for. This means they have experience with the local conditions. They adjust their designs and construction accordingly. You don't necessarily have that level of knowledge. What you do have is a more in-depth, specific understanding of your site. Let's look at the different data you need to collect. I break things down into 2 categories: macro and micro conditions. Macro refers to local weather conditions and the climate of your town, city or region. Micro refers to specific physical conditions of your site, both within your property boundaries and the surrounding properties. One thing to point out: much of this data may not make much sense to you at first. It can be very helpful when talking to experts, especially horticulturalists later on. Let's look at some of the macro conditions. Weather refers to some of the following: rainfall, wind strength and direction, temperatures, sun strength and direction, weather extremes, or snowfall if applicable. 2 things we want to find for each of these points. We want to find the yearly or annual averages, and the change across the seasons or the year. This means you really want to find data points for the following. If we look at rainfall, we need the average annual rainfall. You want to try and get an average based on multiple years instead of just the previous year. Consider if this is likely to increase or decrease in the future. Monthly rainfall patterns. How does the rain get distributed across the year? What seasons or months? Knowing this will help you design water collection, material selection, and activity or feature placement. You also want to know 10, 50, or 100-year rainfall events. You want to try and find the extreme events. What is the heaviest rain, snow or wind etc. that you've had in the last few decades? Similarly, disaster history. What events have happened? Fire, flood, tornado, hurricanes, blizzard, droughts or extreme storms? Understanding this will inform your choices of materials and where you place certain items. You don't want to place large walls or trees near the house if they're likely to cause damage in your yearly hurricane season. You can do a similar list for wind strength and direction and any other local climate or weather conditions. Particularly with extreme events and disasters, you want to over-engineer your design. You want to provide a margin of safety on your infrastructure so your time, money and work is not destroyed in the next big storm. With sun strength, you don't need data per se. I want you to consider the basic things. Is the sun too hot in summer? Would I like to get more into the house in winter? Along with the strength of the sun, you want to know its position at different times of the year. You can use certain materials, like deciduous trees for example, to provide shade in summer and allow sunlight in winter. Knowing where the sun will come from allows you to plant trees in better positions to facilitate this. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell do I do with all this information? As I said, much of it won't make sense or is difficult to visualize. You can take it to experts who may or may not use it. We can also use a little trick and some practice to better imagine the effects of these conditions on your site, but we'll look at this a little later. The second set of conditions I outline refers to the micro, the physical elements of and around your site. These are the site slope or gradient, and how much and how steeply your site slopes, the high and low points of the site, which inform where water will flow to and collect, the soil conditions, pH and consistency, is it loam, clay or sand, at different points of your site. This will be very helpful for plant experts, especially when combined with sun and shade information. You also want to know existing drainage and irrigation patterns. Do you have existing infrastructure in place? This could be useful information for a builder. Definitely need to know existing utility services or easements. This is extremely important information. These refer to areas you generally cannot build permanent structures. Councils may require access to these areas in the future, so if you build over them, you may be required to tear them up. These spaces are best left as garden beds or access paths, something able to be rebuilt easily and cheaply if needed. You also want to know neighbouring elements, buildings, trees, etc. These may result in someone overlooking your area, something you may want to prevent in your design. Another one is shadow diagrams. Where do shadows fall on the site? From both elements on your site and neighbouring sites. Knowing this information is crucial for getting good plant recommendations. It also helps when you position any activities or features you want to do at particular times of the year. Lastly, you can also look at native plants and animals. This isn't 100% necessary, but it can add an extra layer to your design. Providing habitats for native animals can be rewarding, especially if you enjoy watching and listening to them. Similarly with plants, you'll find species that you know are capable of growing in your environment. A few things on the points above. Things like soil pH may require testing. You can find simple kits from a Home Depot or hardware store. You may also like to get more informative soil reports. These are more expensive, but required for engineering of retaining walls or patios, pretty much anything that requires footings or excavations. At this point in time, I'd recommend going basic until you've started doing some of your design work. Alright, you've got a list of things you need to find out. It's up to you how detailed you go in all of them. Personally, I like knowing rainfall, wind, sunlight, shadows, water flow, and native plants and animals. Council elements are also mandatory. Extreme events are helpful, but they can be hard to visualize. So let's look at an extreme event or extreme rainfall example and consider how it can impact our design thinking. I mentioned I'm from Melbourne, Australia. The Bureau of Meteorology provides info on something it calls intensity, frequency, duration, or IFD data. This data provides the following figure. The probability of 50 millimeters or 2 inches of rainfall in 1 hour is 1% each year. Kind of equates to a 1 in 100 year event, sort of. I'd encourage you to look at the link from BOM that I placed below. This page walks you through how things are calculated and what it means. It's very useful, even if it's a little challenging to understand. In this case, it does not mean it will only occur once in 100 years. In fact, over a 50-year period, your probability of having a 1 hour storm like this is actually 40%. If probability is not your thing, don't worry. All you have to know is that the longer you are staying in one area, the more likely an extreme event exceeding this volume will occur. If I spend 50 years living in Melbourne, there is a 40% chance I'll experience 1 hour of 50 millimeters or more of rainfall. Okay, great. So what does this look like? Let's say I have a site area of about 20 square meters, about 215 square feet. It's quite small. 50 millimeters equals 0.05 meters. This corresponds to the depth we'd see if we had 50 millimeters of rainfall in 1 hour. So a 20 meter area times 0.05 meters of depth equals 1 cubic meter or 35 square feet of water. This is actually a substantial amount of water. It's equal to 1,000 litres or 264 gallons. Given the average bathtub is anywhere from 25 to 50 gallons, this is equivalent to 6 to 10 bathtubs of water falling in an hour. Another thing about this thought experiment, this assumes the area it falls on is flat. If your site slopes, the low point will collect water, rapidly filling up. It also ignores materials. Different materials absorb water at different rates. The harder the surface, the more likely the rain will sheet off it and drain to another spot. So how does this info help? Well, look at the low point of your site. If you had a hard surface there, like an entertaining area, it would quickly fill up and overflow. Even with drainage, it may not be enough to allow the water to leave the space and enter stormwater. This is where over-engineering can help. Designing, or have someone else design, drainage to cope with something like this can be extremely helpful. You also learn to consider what material choices are suitable in different spots on your site, and what kinds of activities or features are best for certain positions. Okay, hopefully this gives you an idea of how this knowledge can influence your design thinking. You've got the data, the next step is to visualize it. The best way is with simple pictures overlaid on your base plan. We'll look at putting your base plan together properly in step 4. For now, a simple outline of your site and house will do. Enough so you can interpret the data you present correctly. You can use a few different visual representations, such as colours, arrows, annotations, keys or legends, line weights, hatching, and hatching thickness and hatching orientation are both helpful, and graphs. You want this information to be easily understood when you look at it. You can break it up by month or season, or by category type like wind or rain, or you can do both. You should be able to tell someone the information you found at a glance, when you get the most rain, where it will drain and collect, what your extreme rain event will look like on your existing site. Same thing with wind and sun. Where do the shadows fall at different times of year? Think about what this means for certain activities you want to do, like entertaining. How does this knowledge change your thinking about where good locations in the backyard may be for these kinds of things? And don't forget council regulations. What spaces need to remain accessible for future maintenance, or future potential maintenance? Draw up some simple diagrams or plans outlining as much or as little information as you want. One thing to mention here as well, as you go through the design process, you will add elements into the landscape. This means, of course, they will be impacted by and impact the surrounding conditions. They may cast shade, or redirect wind, or alter water flow, or create new microclimates. Towards the end of the design process, it's worth revisiting your site analysis and trying to guess what your changes will do. Hopefully you can fix some potential problems you had originally. It may be oversight from neighbours, or strong winds or sun, excess rain in some areas, things like that. Also consider that many things you add will take time to grow. How will they impact the site in 5, 10 or 20 years? What do mature plants do to the local conditions? You can use this as an opportunity to learn more about your local weather, climate and site conditions. Learn about the changes from season to season and across the year. If you struggle to imagine some of the figures, break them down into easy chunks and try and lay them onto your site. Hopefully you found this helpful. Feel free to like, subscribe and leave a comment. Also, check out my website, howtogardendesign.com for more information.